and to anybody who might be watching this later, hopefully before the election, because we have a lot of election information here today that we wanted to share. So we just wanted a quick reminder of people. I read last week that early voting is down, which I would probably attribute to a shorter period where you can get your ballot and mail it in. But it is down from the pandemic era when everybody was doing things from home. Just a reminder tomorrow, if you want to vote early and you haven't, or you have a ballot and a mail-in ballot and you're not sure it's going to get to the auditor's office, you could drop it off to the auditor's office if you have a voted ballot. Tomorrow they're open typically 8 to 4:30. You just probably want to check with your auditor's office. They have to be open 8 hours on Saturday. So you can vote early there. You can register to vote there and vote early. You'll just have to follow some information we'll give you to make sure you have what you need. And then, of course, the last day to vote early in person at the auditor's office is on Monday. And then Tuesday is the election day, and the polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the big news is all absentee ballots must be received by the county auditor's office by the time the polls close. So at this point, if you haven't mailed your ballots in, the safe bet is to walk it down to your auditor's office. And I noticed when I voted early, they have somebody out there monitoring people that drive up, and they will bring the ballot to you, to your car. I live in Polk County, so I know that they are doing that. So I'm assuming they might either have a drop box or have somebody there available to accept the ballot, so you don't have to wait in line to return them. You can also call your auditor's office and find out what your options are. I put a couple of links in here. This is all on our website, so you can grab those links from the website. But to check your voter registration, if you're not registered to vote, check what you need to do to register, same day registration. You can check your absentee ballot status. So if you've mailed your absentee ballot and you want to know if it's been received, you can do it that way. I did check mine just to see if it was updated, and it was. And then the Secretary of State's office has a great voter ready website that we have there at the bottom for any other questions. It includes special information for people with disabilities who are voting. I think this is the hardest part. We get the most questions about is the fact that there are so many things on the ballot that people don't realize. And so we know that there are county offices on there. We've listed some. Judges are always a tough one for people to get information on, but I put 2 links in there. One is to a report that the Des Moines Register did on the judges, and it is a statewide report where they list a few, if there's any controversies with those judges. And then the second link is the Iowa Bar Association rates and ranks judges. So they get kind of a percentage of approval. And it is based on other attorneys. So other lawyers rank the judges on fairness and quality. So you can look at those as well. And then of course you have the state legislature. You may or may not have a state senator because only half are up. Everybody has a congressperson that's running. We have no US senators running this year. And then of course, president. You can find your sample ballot on your auditor's website, but I also was listening to Iowa Public Radio yesterday, and they have a election guide, and actually they can, if you go to this website, you can just put in your address and you can find your ballot. So that might be easier than searching your auditor and going to your auditor's website and then finding it there. You can find it directly from Iowa Public Radio. So that's a really great service there. And so that helps me. I actually did that myself, looked at it before I went to vote. My daughter was nervous. It's her first time voting for a presidential race. She just had a school board last time. So she was really nervous about what else was on the ballot. So those are good places to take a look before you go vote. Just to talk about knowing your ballot, there are 2 constitutional amendments that are on the ballot this year. And as with everything, it seems pretty easy, and but you probably have read some of the news coverage of these changes. The first one, Constitutional Amendment 1, is the line of succession for the governor. So what happens when our governor steps down, dies, can't fulfill the office in some way? That happened with Governor Terry Branstad. He was appointed U.S. ambassador to China and left the office. And it is known that the lieutenant governor assumes the role of governor when the governor becomes unable to fulfill the term. But there is nothing in our Constitution that states who appoints the lieutenant governor. So some senators thought it should be the governor with Senate approval. Some senators thought the governor should just do it because they're elected as a team. But the Supreme Court ruled that there's nothing in the Constitution that tells the state how to do it. So this First Amendment basically just does one thing. It basically says that the governor is allowed to appoint the lieutenant governor. So if you vote yes, you're voting that the governor can appoint the lieutenant governor. If you vote no, it makes no changes. There's no clarity then about who can appoint the governor. There are some people encouraging a no vote because they feel like the Senate should have the right to approve of that appointment like they do all other governors' appointments. And so there are some that have a different view, but there's no other option. You're just voting yes or no to this option of having the governor appoint. The second constitutional amendment does 2 things. The first one is pretty simple. Iowa law right now says that an 18-year-old can vote. That's federal law too. And it also says that a 17-year-old can vote in a primary if they're going to be 18 by the time that there's the general election. So they'd be able to vote in June. And if they're going to be eligible to vote in November. So that basically allows a 17-year-old to pick their party's person that they want to vote for in November. And so that is Iowa law. Our Constitution is outdated. Our Constitution says that you must be 21 to vote, and that's been struck down because of the nationally 18-year-olds can vote. So it just basically updates our Constitution with what is in law. If you vote no, it's still going to be law. But if it's in the Constitution, of course, it's harder to change that. Law can change. The second part of it does have some people concerned. It basically changes our Constitution from saying that, only a citizen. It's right now our Constitution says every citizen can vote. The change would say only citizens of the U.S. can vote. And so there's a concern that if you vote yes, that might allow people to require proof of citizenship before being allowed to vote. So your social security number, your birth certificate, other things that you use to prove that you're a citizen. And that is kind of becoming an issue this year because our Secretary of State has just announced that there are 2,000 people that said they were not citizens when they got their driver's license, but yet are registered to vote. What some of the refugee and immigrant associations have said is that's because they become naturalized citizens since they registered to, or since they got their driver's license. So there is some people who may be required to show proof of citizenship if they go in to vote now. So that's kind of one of the things that people have brought up about that. Doesn't seem like it's much of a wording change, but as I've learned, words have meaning. So I've learned that how you say things legally has really important consequences. So, but just wanted people to know that those two things are on the ballot. I'm going to turn it over to Carlin to talk about their rights. I just wanted to make one note that this long list of rights comes from the Iowa DD Council's one pager on voting, which is on our website. So you can find that full document on the website as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carlin Crow with the Iowa DD Council. And I think Amy turned this one over to me because for the past month, we've been going around the state talking to voters, people with disabilities, their family, community providers about voting and the importance of voting for people with disabilities, and making sure everybody knows their rights as a voter. So this is the long list of rights, but when we did our trainings and provided information on this, we really boiled it down to 4 points. And actually had some pretty good discussion on this in some of the trainings after people shared some of their experiences in going to vote. And if any of you on today want to share an experience at your polling place, we welcome that. But your basic rights in voting is that you have a right to vote independently and privately. So when you go to your polling place, nobody else can look at your ballot or can check it over when you're done unless you ask them to do that. So that's why polling places are set up and look at each other's ballot, but you don't have, or nobody has the right to tell you who to vote for, obviously. But when you're at your polling place, nobody there can check your ballot to make sure that you crossed off the or circled in the right circles, or make sure that you double check it for you, which we have heard has happened. So that's why I gave that example. So independently and privately, again, unless you ask for help, and you have the right to have help, and you can bring help with you and discuss that at your polling place, that somebody's going to help you fill out your ballot. Or when you come to your polling place, you can ask for help. And then people at your polling place will be assigned, 2 people will be assigned to help you fill out your ballot if that's how you choose to do it. Your other choice at your polling place is to use accessible voting equipment. And every polling place should have a machine that, not the one where you put your ballot in, but one where you can actually use the screen to have your ballot read to you, or touch screen your choices. So it must be accessible, and also you must be able to use it independently and privately, unless, again, you ask for help. So I have seen personally at a polling site where somebody was using the machine and the poll worker was standing right next to them to make sure they were using it right. But in that event, they were seeing who they voted for, and that's not really acceptable. So, so basically, also you have the right to an accessible voting location. And if you go to your polling place and you use a mobility device and you can't get in the door, or you can't get through to use the accessible voting equipment, then that's something that you should immediately call for help in your polling place and see if they can help you. If they can't, you can call the Secretary of State's office, who will then alert your county auditor and make it right for you. That's their job, and they have a hotline that I think we have on a coming up, a slide coming up, a hotline to call on election day to help with any problems or any issues, or if something is just not right at your polling place, if there's people hanging around outside that should not be hanging around, that's what that hotline is for too. So, so we boiled it down to kind of those 4 rights because everything else kind of falls under that. One question though that comes up a lot in trainings is if someone has a guardian, are they allowed to vote? And the individual is allowed to vote whether you have a guardian or not. If you want your guardian to help you, your guardian can help you if you ask them to, but your guardian is not allowed to vote for you unless you give them permission. Or some people have had their rights revoked in a court of law, and that's very rare. But in that case, they're not able to vote and their guardian is. But again, that's a very rare scenario. And so guardians, again, are allowed to help, but are not allowed to vote for someone. Is there anything on this list that anybody has questions on, or anything that we can go into in a little more detail? Okay. Thanks. Back to you, Amy.
Thanks. So,
There's
yeah, here's the voter hotline. It's SOS Votes, but if you're like me, I don't know the numbers associated with the letters, so I put the phone number there. I know Disability Rights Iowa does some stuff on election day too with challenges, but really the Secretary of State voter hotline is probably the place to go. I would just remind people that when you do vote, you always have the option to vote a provisional ballot. And they have to give you a ballot. They'll mark it provisional, which means they might have to make sure everything is correct before they count that ballot. But if at any way you're challenged, you always have that option. So don't leave and not vote because you always have that ability if you have the proof that you need that you are eligible to vote. Right now you have 2 options to vote. One is vote, as we mentioned before, you can vote tomorrow or Monday in the auditor's office. Just remember to bring your photo ID and an ID that has your current address and your photo. If you have changed your address, you just need to bring in something with your new address, like a utility bill, or I know that's challenging for some people if you have a payer and it goes to a separate location, but like a rental agreement or something, some piece of mail with your address on it, maybe a bank statement to show your current address. If you do have changes, make sure you go early. When you go in, it might take a little bit of extra time for them to make those changes. And then if you are not registered to vote, we had that link earlier that talked about where you need to go, what extra information you need to bring to be able to register at the same time that you vote. And you can do that either when you're voting early or on election day. Again, the reminder that if you have an absentee ballot still in your hands and it's been voted, you need to take it to the auditor's office to be sure that it's counted, because postmarks won't count anymore. Also, you can, if you haven't voted that ballot yet, you can surrender it unvoted at your polling site on election day or in the auditor's office, and they will exchange it for another ballot. So that's another option, but you can't take a voted ballot to your precinct on election day and give it to them. They can't accept that. You need to take it to the auditor's office. Voting on election day, again, the polls open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You will need your photo ID. If you've done that before, they just scan it and everything's checked out. And then of course, other information. as Carlin mentioned, try out the accessible voting machine and report back how it worked. And if it didn't, the poll workers, did they know what they were doing, or if a family member have a disability? It's just try it out. I actually tried it one year just to see how it worked, and it was pretty slick. But again, I live in Polk County, so they have more machines and training than maybe some of the smaller counties. So I think we'd like to know how it worked out. And I think, did you guys get some comments back the last round of voting on those machines? Carlin, do you remember? Or
Um,
were you around?
yes, a couple. Well, I just in some of the trainings too that poll workers weren't quite sure how to use them, and so in some, it was in more rural communities that people weren't trained on how to use them, so that didn't exactly help the voter. And also, each county can purchase whichever kind of machine they choose. So not everybody's using the same kind of machine. So that's why it makes it difficult to do like statewide training um, on a voting machine. But yeah, we did get some comments back that just, people in the poll workers didn't know how to help because they hadn't been trained on the machines.
So I'm going to transition over. Also, I just wanted to, in terms of rights, we had heard one county had mentioned on those constitutional ballot amendments that maybe all of the language of the change was not on the ballot, but you had to read it on a um, like a poster on the wall. I just want to remind you, if you do encounter something like that, you can always ask for assistance again for somebody to read that to you if you would like. If you are somebody who has a visual impairment and cannot, read it, and you're using the accessible machine and it's not reading it to you, then you have that right to have somebody help you, either somebody or somebody that's an election worker. They are um, trained not to be partisan. So and they'll likely come over in sets of twos just to make sure that everything is fine. But I'm going to transition over. Carlin had mentioned that they had been doing some candidate trainings. And so I wanted to turn it over to her and kind of give you some information about what they learned. They did some work with Disability Rights Iowa, and then others with on their own and voter trainings. So we kind of have a map here of where all they've been this last year, training on voting or talking to candidates. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Carlin.
Yeah, and you can see we've gone to the far reaches of the state to talk to people. These are not all candidate forums. Some of them were voter training, some of them were voter information sessions that were led by people with disabilities, advocates who were speaking to their peers. So it was great to be able to help with some of those also. And some were candidate forums, and just want to give a shout out to Disability Rights Iowa, who initiated setting up some of these forums around the state. And they were a great way to engage current incumbents, sitting legislators who are running again for office, and also candidates on specific issues that affect people with disabilities. So we had some really good conversations at some of these forums. And we also, at the voter training sessions, had people who had never voted before say that they would. We had good questions that came up. Everything from, again, how you use the voting machine to who should I vote for, which we can't tell you who to vote for, but we certainly gave examples of, if you're not sure and you're still doing research, where to research candidates, similar to the site that Amy pulled up from Iowa Public Radio. There's other sites like that. Ballotpedia is one that we've used. Our own Infonet has ways that you can look up candidates and do some more research on them. So, gave out a lot of great information then to encourage people to do more research before they fill out their ballot or before they go to their polling place. And was encouraged when some people said they like to do absentee because they get their ballot at home and then they go through it and research people and what's on it. And that was great to hear. That's a great idea. And you can also do that by looking at a sample ballot online. So I think as far as the candidates forums, we learned a lot of things just listening to both advocates and what their questions were to some of the candidates, and then from what the candidates and sitting incumbents had to say to us. And the first thing that they all said at every session was, we're here to hear from you as much as we know that you want information from us about who you should vote for. And so it was encouraging to know that they're listening. And many of them knew about many of the policies that we've been working on the last couple years, or that they may have already been in office. And the one that was the biggest topic of discussion was employment for people with disabilities. And the word really got out last session that there are some barriers that shouldn't be there, and especially at a time where the workforce, we have a lot of workforce issues filling positions, and especially those that also help people with disabilities, that maybe we could do better for people with disabilities to be able to have more access to employment or be able to work more hours, additional money. So that was the number one topic. The other was Medicaid waiting lists, and also the MCOs, and the privatization of Medicaid came up several times, and denials by MCOs of services and equipment. So those are all obviously things that we will take back and talk to lawmakers about when we know who all is in the legislature. Come hopefully next week we'll have all that finalized, but kind of starting in January. And also wanted to point out and highlight that almost every single legislator that was in office, and some of even the candidates, mentioned Representative Josh Turek, because he has been mentioned as the first Iowa legislator that has a visible disability, uses a wheelchair, and that made a huge impression on the legislature, not just from how they had to see his mobility challenges getting around the Capitol and the accommodations that had to be made, but how when legislation came up that regarded people with disabilities, he provided education about how, or any legislation, it didn't have to be about people with disabilities, how legislation would affect people with disabilities. And we knew this from listening to him for the last couple of years, but to hear other legislators, especially in the other party, talk about him and the influence that he's had was very impressive. And so that his influence should not be diminished. So I want to give a shout out to him. And so, election day is coming up soon. We might know on Wednesday who our new leaders are. We should for the Iowa legislature, for sure. So it's never too early to start your plan for advocacy for your issues and for the upcoming year. And so we have some suggestions here to what to do after the election. I think we're all going to breathe a huge sigh of relief and feel so grateful to not have to listen to television and radio commercials anymore, and get over that. But while you're still thinking about it, it's a great time to make a plan for just discussing issues. And the first thing you could do is contact your legislators in your district and congratulate them on winning, and introduce yourself if they're new or if you haven't met them before. and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you more about issues regarding people with disabilities or whatever your issue is. Mention, a policy that's important to you, and then maybe set up a time to talk before they get to Des Moines in January. Set up a time to talk in your hometown, and bring your friends who also share your values and want to work on the same issues. They want to hear from people, and having you reach out now and provide information to them before they come to Des Moines for the legislative session is like them doing easy research. So they learn. It's a way to educate them, and they want to listen, and they want to hear from you. So those are some ideas that we had for kind of your to-do list moving forward after the election. And also, take some time for yourself too, and breathe a sigh of relief that it's all over. And because it's also good for your health. And Amy found this information the other day, and actually I heard it on the radio right after she mentioned it. So it's really good.
Yeah, it's again, I was looking at the NPR or Iowa Public Radio website after I was listening on the radio about their guide, and I saw oh, it's civic engagement is good for your health, and that includes voting. Voting is one form of civic participation, but it's also volunteering for an organization or working at your church, or they list community gardening, just things that get you out and help improve your community. Those types of things really do make an impact on your health. And you can kind of see that if you've never volunteered, your health status or cognitive decline, I think is what they rated, goes up. And so the more you do in your community, the more physically and mentally healthy you are. So vote, it's good for your health. As
Yeah,
if you need another reason.
I liked how they mentioned too that, and we talk about this in trainings too. It's like it gives us all power and gives us control over something that, we don't have control over the commercials that are being put out and what we're hearing every day. And we just can't control all the noise. But when we go to vote and make our selection, we are the only ones that have control over that. So that gives us not just a sense of satisfaction, but it's good for our health.
Yeah, and I actually listened to a really interesting study that was done in Iowa about how people express concerns about issues but don't necessarily vote along with their issue agreement. But what one of the commentators said is, but if you get people redirected and thinking about, well, so pollution or water quality is a big issue for you, or homelessness is a big issue for you, go volunteer at your community pantry instead of being frustrated by the fact that lawmakers aren't doing anything about it. And so, I mean, I think that's kind of ties into this, that there's other ways to engage in your community on an issue than just working with your legislator. It's also volunteering to help that. And I think you see that in a lot with like Robert Fisher, whose energies were directed at working in his community to make it more accessible rather than going to the legislature and saying, we want this mandated, so it's a good example. And I think maybe people feel more comfortable starting off doing it that way before going directly to their legislators about their issue. That is all we had for you today, except for a couple reminders on our upcoming Capital Chat will be December 13th. So as you mentioned earlier, it's kind of an odd timing. We were trying to get around the holidays and be far enough into the year that we know maybe some committee members, committee chairs. And so we've set it for December 13th at noon, again, Friday. And then Carlin or Brooke, do you want to talk about your webinars that you have coming up?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have two actually on November 13th. So we're going to be super busy on the 13th. Our first one starts at noon, and it's a series of 4 different webinars about about health advocacy. And so each of those webinars, the 4 that happen on the 13th, the 20th, the 4th, and the 11th, will have a different topic, but it will all be for advocates on how to advocate at their doctor's office, how to make a health plan, how to get the care that you need. And it's actually conducted by self-advocates themselves. So highly encourage you to sign up for those. And those websites or those links to register on our website, on our calendar, on our homepage, and then share them with advocates you may know that could use that information. It's a project we've been doing with, the DD Council has been working with the University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities for a couple of years now. So it's really exciting to see these finally come to fruition, and especially that they're run by self-advocates. So if you're familiar with Ed Esbeck, he's one of the coaches for these things. So sign up for those. There's 4 of them. You don't have to sign up for all 4. You can go to just one of them or sign up for all 4. And then also on the 13th, we partnered with the Department of Education, Ask Resource Centers, Disability Rights Iowa, and Health and Human Services to do a webinar on navigating your special education resources in the school for your students. And so that's primarily geared for parents, although students definitely can register for that as well. And that's from 5:30 to 7. Again, that's on our website. And then one thing, I know Amy talked about Capitol Chat, and we have our once the legislation starts, we have some meetings that we'll do with legislators, and then a reception at the Capitol on the 29th. We also have an iAble webinar that we'll be doing with the Treasury's Department. That is January 23rd. And all of this information will be on our website for you to sign up for.
I will make sure I add the missing, those 2 missing webinars to this slide presentation and repost it on our website. So we have it all in that location too.
Perfect.
But yeah, everything's on the calendar right now. And so I will end with that. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can, well, maybe I'm going to stop sharing. Seems my computer doesn't want to let me stop there.
Helen or Jenny, do you have any questions for us while Amy
Things
plays with her
around.
computer? Okay, thanks, Jenny. Thanks for joining us. Helen, how about you? Are you good?
I don't know how I can.
I think Helen's good. I do. No,
I
unless you
see
put
there's,
some.
is there something in the chat? I just now am able to see the chat.
Yes, Jenny said she had no questions.
Oh, okay. All
Well,
right. Well, thanks
guess we'll give
everyone.
everybody 20 minutes back of your day. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Go ahead and vote.
Vote. Bye, everybody.